All right, everybody. Welcome back to another installation of the Thatcher Report. I'm happy to share this latest essay. If you're new to this and you're following me on YouTube, which is a new thing for me, I have a podcast and a Substack called Thatcher Report. I tend to start with the Substack because I'm more of a writer, a literary type, I guess. And I write the essays and then I read them and kind of riff on them. So that's the idea here. I'm also going to be interrupted at any minute by people working on my house, which is just a ongoing project. So, okay, so this essay that I just released yesterday is called Honey, I Shrunk the Party. And the subtitle is, I hope you survive the sexist, veganophobic title and dated Gen X reference. Veganophobic doesn't really roll off the tongue, but I'm making fun of vegans who don't eat honey. I should say before I kind of launch into this, today is 9/11. I guess officially I'm a survivor of 9/11 because I was down there that morning and I live nearby, and it's something I think about particularly acutely on this day, but it's never too far for me, to be honest. And I'm also thinking, of course, about the horrible assassination of Charlie Kirk yesterday. You're going to hear in this essay my needling liberals who tell us about fascism always happening, but it seems pretty clear now that the trend of assassinations, murder attempts are mostly coming from the left, not entirely, but burning elderly Jews alive in Boulder, Colorado, attempting to burn down Josh Shapiro's house in Pennsylvania, murdering Charlie Kirk, attempting to assassinate Donald Trump, all the other targeted killings, they're mostly coming from the left. There are certainly some coming from the right. It's bad, but that's the trend right now. And liberals tell us crime is down. Okay. But that's what I'm seeing. And I think, don't believe your eyes. Believe your eyes. All right. So back to the essay. Honey, I Shrunk the Party. I hope you enjoy the dated Gen X reference. The Democratic Party is shrinking. Okay, so this is obvious, right? This has been documented very clearly by really interesting and smart data reporting, which is kind of a newer trend in journalism, data reporting by the New York Times, which has incredible resources and an occasional dedication to journalism, but they do have good resources. You know, the newsroom is sort of both highly skilled and highly polarized, not the greatest blend, but they've reported a lot about these three items. One of them is that Democrats are earning fewer votes in presidential elections in nearly every county in America since the rise of Trump, maybe even from before. So we're talking a decade of analysis that in every county in America, there are more and more Republican voters for presidential elections. There are a few exceptions in some very wealthy enclaves that are blue, but that's like a handful compared to the rest of the country. The Wall Street Journal and others have reported about how low the Democratic Party is polling. Now, polls are pretty bad. They're just kind of useless nowadays, but it is a data point that needs to be contextualized. And here's the other piece of context. Party registrations are down everywhere for Democrats. That's also reported in the New York Times. So that's happening nationally. So the party is shrinking. It's not growing. It's large, it's important, it has money, but it's shrinking. Oh, and speaking of money, there's also reporting about how donors are closing their checkbooks. So I think it's objectively true that the Democratic Party, is not doing that well. Meanwhile, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a local congresswoman here in New York City, meanwhile, true story, she stays in luxury hotels and flies first class or private on her fighting oligarchy tour. I don't know why. I don't know why she has to stay in a 5-star hotel to fight oligarchs, but okay, good for her. They must be very comfortable. I've not been in one, but I'm sure they're lovely. Ilhan Omar in Minnesota is now worth up to $30 million based on her politically connected husband's great investments. Funny how that works in politics. And the quote unquote African American child of Oscar nominee Mira Nair, her son is Zohran Mamdani. He campaigns against a very income inequality that's enabled his entire gilded life. And despite his personal and familial wealth, yep, he lives in a rent-stabilized apartment in Astoria. So a lot of apartments in New York City are rent-stabilized. If you ask me, far too many. It suppresses the market and creates all types of distortions. But in certain parts of New York, apartments are just stabilized based on their location, not about the tenant who occupies them. So whether or not that makes sense or not, you tell me. In a gentrifying area like Astoria, which is a nicer and nicer and nicer part of Western Queens near Manhattan, it shouldn't be rent stabilized in the first place, but it is, and he's living there, so he is enjoying a subsidy from the city, and he's rich. Okay, so those are the young progressives, and that's the or the DSA, or there's different names, but they're young by and large. They're certainly progressive. That's that side of the party, and they're growing within the slowly collapsing pie of the Democratic Party. They're the growing slice. The young progressives thrive in expensive, crumbling cities across the country, and you'll find them in mayoral offices, attorney generals, things like that. District attorneys, and in the House of Representatives, which are obviously districts, local districts. Soon, these young progressives may be in the Senate and governor's offices. I think that's inevitable, but maybe only in like super, super blue states, like the two states I've lived in, California and Massachusetts. I just think it's clear that some of them at one point might become a governor or senator. Don't know if that's going to happen in New York because we have a lot of red voters upstate. Okay, so those are the young progressives. On the other side of the party are the old centrists. They essentially want to preserve the status quo. Now, I'll note that a majority of Americans have rejected the status quo by voting MAGA or for these young progressive Dems, which are certainly not for the status quo. So it's a curious place to be. They're not stupid. They know that it's a problem, but I don't see what they're doing to address that. And they're the vanishing slice within the shrinking party pie. I mean, it's a smaller pie, and the progressives are getting bigger within that pie. So I just wanted to, so that's about the politicians, essentially. What I really want to talk about is like your regular Democratic voters, the people listening to this podcast who, hopefully are engaged politically and love living in a democracy where you get to vote. So I'm a lifelong Democrat, as you know. I've only lived in coastal blue states, as you most likely know. But now I have the wrong ethnic identity for the Democratic Party. So I have a more objective view, I think, of them, and I'm going to do my own division of the party supporters. Now, before I go into that, just to say, what does that mean? I have the wrong ethnic identity. I'm a Jewish Zionist. Now, that's a redundant term because Judaism is the indigenous religion of Israel, and Zionism is about having the state of Israel. That was really a 19th century idea. I think it's a good idea. I think it's weird to talk about it anymore because Israel just exists. But anyways, that's the term of art that the left has fastened onto. So we need to respond to it. So I'm a Jewish Zionist. I think that's redundant. Jews are all Zionists because we're all from Israel. But it needs to be specified. I have to specify the two terms for liberals because they divide us now into good Jews and bad Jews. Good Jews are Jews that disavow the state of Israel. Bad Jews are the ones who feel aligned with the state of Israel. Just the fact that it exists. I don't vote in Israel. I didn't serve in the military. I have nothing to do with any policies in Israel, but sure, I support it. Italians, Americans will, kind of vaguely, maybe not so specifically, but they'll just support the country of Italy and they want it to do well. I think that's kind of similar to how I feel about Israel. But that's bad. That makes me a bad Jew. And the people making that decision of who's a good Jew and has a bad Jew, If they've ever been to the region at all, which most of them never will, they don't literally know what it's like on the ground over there, and they unfortunately they're blocked from understanding the region because their academies, news sources, and cultural centers are activist, not intellectual. So they don't get good information. They're not really up to date on Arab nationalism or Islamism, or these are not stupid people at all, but they're not. I don't think they're really involved in discussions about what's happening in the Arab world, what's happening in Iran, Central Asia, and certainly with the Jews. They don't really know what they're talking about. They can't know what they're talking about because they're activists. Activists are not intellectuals. They're activists. So anyways, that said, I'm not in the party. I can't be in the party anymore, really, because of my Judaism. So now I have a view of the two types of Democratic voters. I think there's only really two main groups left. Well, the first group are the true blue believers, right? The true believers. Now, I can show you the articles in their own news sources. The New York Times is the kind of godfather of the liberal elite movement, that the party is shrinking. But they don't agree. They just are like, okay, they don't really think that indicates anything really wrong, profoundly wrong with the party. It's okay, sure, there's a couple of news stories in the New York Times about it, but that's more noise. That's not signal. It's not that important. And then when I point out, the changing tides within the party, well, they say, well, the kafia queers are, they're on the fringe. That's not really the mainstream. And AOC, she's kind of, she's really good looking and she's kind of cute and she says cute stuff, but she's not really like that critical to the party, right? That's what they're going to say. They're sort of like, they're still a sort of a center in the party, and there's all these people on the fringe, but don't let them distract you. And these people are really excited about Gavin Newsom, his podcast, his pompadour. There's probably a couple of other people I'll get to that they're excited about. And, they're not, they have people in the party that they're focused on, that they love, and they're really, really, really focused on the obvious, the clear, the easily documented, and the imminent Nazification of our country. I mean, it's happening right now. It's as fast and observable and deadly as climate change. This is happening. This is the emergency that they're facing. This is the true blue perspective. And they have tactics and strategies to do with this. They're going to resist the growing tide of fascism by shaming the majority of Americans who disagree with them. I deal with this all the time. I'm in a WhatsApp debate at this very moment about it with somebody from my wonderful little synagogue. And but since shaming Americans who disagree with them doesn't seem to be working, maybe break out the COVID boosters for their kids, maybe have calm talks with their kids about their future gender identities. These are like the emergency measures that they have to resort to. It might be unscientific, it might actually be harmful for children, but these are the end times for America. I mean, this is it. The country is over. It's ending. So they gotta do it. And as just an aside, I more and more now in Brooklyn, it's almost exclusively on white people, but that shouldn't really matter. I see people wearing T-shirts that say "Protect Trans Kids." It's just a trend I'm seeing. I love paying attention to trends, and for the outdoor maskers that I also see in New York, I can only imagine the back to school anxieties. COVID. It's like the boogeyman is coming up out of the closet when they're asleep. Okay, so the true blue believers, they're in the hashtag insistence. They refuse. You're not allowed to question it. You can't question it. They have a consensus we all must share. And I've dealt with this so many times. Perhaps you have too. If you even just sort of say, oh, maybe there's another side to this. Oh, it's kind of interesting. There's a different politician from a different party has something to say. That's verboten. You're not allowed to say that. You have to adhere to the consensus at all times. And because, it's impolite to waver from the true consensus. And B, it indicates that you're missing the point, that the Nazis or the fascists or, I don't know, people who disagree with liberals, they are taking over our streets right now. Okay, maybe not right now, but like this very minute. Okay, maybe not this very minute, maybe the next minute, maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's November of 2028, or it's a little unclear. Maybe it'll be January in 2020, 2029. But listen, don't ask when the takeover is happening. Remember, that's not acceptable behavior. You just have to trust us. It's happening. It's an emergency. We're being told so in legacy media. We understand. And we're going to tell you, as a true blue believer, what our priorities are in 2025. BLM, what I like to call trans Islamophobia, because why not just get both groups in one? Fighting that trans Islamophobia is so important. Advocating for illegal immigrants is a priority, huge priority. And then, of course, DEI, which I call more accurately ranking humans on scales of victimhood based on their lived experiences. I don't know what an unlived experience is. I love qualifying experiences with lived, because people, we're not talking about rocks. We're not talking about mountains. We're talking about people with lived experiences. Just absolutely cracked me up. But listen, ranking them on scales of victimhood, that's really important. And then the last one that I can see is denying crime. Crime it's dropping, people. Charlie Kirk was just assassinated yesterday. A young Ukrainian woman was murdered in North Carolina in Charlotte, but crime is dropping. Oh, there was also an attempted stabbing down the block from me on Eastern Parkway in Crown Heights. There was a murder around the corner, literally right around the corner from me, of 3 people. And at the West Indian Day Parade, 6 people were shot, but crime is dropping. That's what we're told. So let's deny crime. So let me just do that really again. It's BLM, it's DEI, it's trans Islamophobia, it's crime denial. These are the most important things to the true blue believers. I'm just going to note that maybe those ideals are a little bit outdated and perhaps unrelatable to most Americans. But listen, don't ask questions. They're in a battle for their very lives. And truthfully, honestly, this is very selfless. The true blue believers, they're fighting for all of us. They're just ahead of a curve we can't see coming yet. Like, these are like pioneers of the truth. They're out there in the vast plains of native lands that we must acknowledge, and only they can see the truth of the fascistification of America. I mean, this is kind of exciting. Let's just be honest. It's kind of exciting. This is like the third act of a superhero movies. Right now, the doubters have all been proved wrong. The plucky heroes have finally put aside their little squabbles, and they're united together. The next step, save the universe. All right, true bluers, you're going to fly in and save us all. Oh, wait, but hold on. Let's just check Zillow for real estate listings in Portugal or maybe Quebec province, because, obviously by lunch, America will be the fourth Reich. Now, these are the same people who will only Zelle or Venmo their nannies, landscape crew, cleaning ladies, pool cleaners, and Instacart servants, because who bothers with cash when you count your money in millions? I mean, it's kind of petty to deal with cash. All right, so that's the true blue. That's the base. That's the blue base. I think it's really funny to think about them. I'm related to a lot of them. I get it. I love them. They're people. They deserve respect, but their ideas are kind of funny to me. Okay, so then the next group, the last group, are the post-Democrats, or really the skeptics. I wrote them as post-Democrats. Really, they're skeptics. I think they're a growing group, and I think they're trans party, because they're not really totally within the Democratic camp anymore, like yours truly. So they're the growing faction, while the true bluers circle their PHEVs, their plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, the wagons, to resist the Redskins. I mean, the red voters. That's not PC to say. The post-Democrats, the skeptics, have within them, there is 2 camps that I've observed. I know which camp I'm in. I have friends in the other camp, and they're very articulate about it, so it's great to discuss it with them. The 2 camps are basically, have you left the Democrats with one foot or with both feet? That's it, right? So you're either partially or entirely abandoned the party. Okay, how do we know this? How do you measure it? It's kind of vibes. They're kind of tired of all like celebrating, identity. Let's just call it identity politics. I don't have to go specifying that anymore. They're just kind of tired of all the NPR stories about some niche group struggling for survival in a poetry contest. You can look at actual party registrations, which the New York Times did, or, more saliently, you can think about who they're going to vote for in whatever election comes next, if they have a choice, which I, as a New Yorker, don't, because in deep blue states with closed primaries and off-year elections that are designed to suppress turnout, we don't really have the democracy we should have, which is you get to vote for whoever you want. You get one vote, but you get to vote for whoever's running, right? You can't do that right now. So that's sorry, little interruption there from the phone, but that's the problem for us, is that maybe we're leaving the party, maybe we want to vote for others, but I don't even know if we can in blue states. Now, these are the same people, switching back over to the true blue folks. They tell us that democracy is in peril, democracy is over, the Republicans are threatening democracy. Meanwhile, I have closed primaries and I can't vote in their state. So that seems a problem. So I'm throwing a lot at you, but I think you get what I'm saying. There are the skeptics have kind of been driven nuts by the party, and they're self-ejecting either wholly or partially. And that's why I call them trans party. And then the true blue people are essentially saying, there's nothing to see here, please move along. And they're the loyalists. And how I can measure any of this stuff, it's obviously pretty qualitative. But the Free Press, which is a new news source that I am a paid subscriber to, they're now being sold for $200 million. And that's just indicative, I think, of the shifting media landscape, where there's new wealth being created. Obviously, some podcasters like Joe Rogan have received individually huge amounts of money too. And this is the changing world we're living in, and that's maybe quantifiable. Let's just look at the value of the new media, which is not repeating the true blue lines. That's only coming from the legacy media. So, and then meanwhile, this legacy media, they're just kind of getting even like tighter, self-reinforcing concentric circles based on identity values. Today is 9/11. It chokes me up to think about it. The articles in the New York Times today mention Islamophobia as the big kind of aspect of 9/11. So instead of talking about the Americanophobia of the radical Muslims who murdered 3,000 Americans, no, the focus is on the supposed victims, which are American Muslims, and Islamophobia. So that's sort of like this, like, it's kind of weird to focus on that on 9/11. I just think, A, does it even exist? How do you measure it? How many Muslims are being killed in the streets by Americans? Hopefully none. I don't think very many. Zero is the ideal number. But that's like, it's sort of like this like little, echo chamber. That's what the legacy media has become, because identity values are the most important things in the world. So, and the other evidence is that we have old centrists. Where are the new centrists? Let's take a moment of silence for all the new centrists out there. Okay. You can also look at the post-Democrats, the skeptics, are skeptical not only of the Democratic Party, but also of the academic elite. So you can just look at shifting college admissions. This is, anecdotal, but I know more and more kids are not applying to Ivy League schools, and are applying to Vanderbilt or other selective schools, or University of Chicago, where they are trying to be more neutral. And then I think you could look to rising trade school enrollment, because, what is the point of sending your kid or going yourself as a young person to an elite liberal arts school when you can maybe get a much better job as a plumber or a skilled tradesperson? So these post-Democrats, these skeptics, they kind of understand that the Ivies and other, similar, very selective liberal arts college are less important for three reasons. One, AI is coming, right? How much does it really matter? How much does your queer poetry studies class at Harvard really help you in the era of AI? There's just so many decades of tuition inflation that it just seems like just not a good deal, or just frankly just unaffordable to most people to send their kids to like a Wesleyan or an Oberlin or something like that. And the third observation is that these elite academies have become really social justice freedom centers, celebrating hopefully disabled cutie BIPOC vegans. This is the most important thing. We got to focus on the niche identity of our people, and celebrate them, because they're victims and they need us. They need our noblesse oblige to raise them above their victimhood. That's very important. But what that means is that the elite academies are no longer places of knowledge to advance Western civilization, which is, I thought, is why we started them in the first place. Now, it's probably racist of me to say that, and maybe I'm phobic of somebody. I'm not sure. I hope they'll tell me in the comments. But the universities are not really universities anymore. They're more like social activism factories. AI is coming, and they cost a lot. So true blue believers don't really care, but I think the skeptics are kind of like scratching their heads and wondering how they should best interface with these institutions. So let's talk about the skeptics a little bit more. There's two groups within this group, and they are, there's people who are clinging to hope. These are the people who still have one foot firmly entrenched in the circle. Their other foot isn't in the Republican circle, it's just outside. But they're clinging to hope. And I talk to these people, these are smart people, and they're just really, what are they hoping for? They're hoping that the Democratic Party writ large shakes off the progressive zealots, which is what a lot of people like to say is what intifada means, shaking off, right? It's peaceful, right? It's just a peaceful intifada. So these people are hoping for a peaceful intifada maybe, but they're hoping that the Democratic Party just kind of like wakes up from its fever dream, shakes off these kind of annoying fringe progressive zealots, and reverts to the status quo centrist, like the Gen X classic, Rahm Emanuel, or maybe Maryland Governor Wes Moore. Hey, he's black, to patch their ship of 1,000 self-bored holes. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment to explain that a little bit more. Rahm Emanuel seems to be running for president for 2028. It's obviously very early, but he's a smart guy. He's testing the waters. He is just a completely irrelevant person to Gen Z, and I think to even millennials. But there you go. He's a Gen X classic from the original Bill Clinton administration. And then Maryland Governor Wes Moore seems like a centrist, a good guy, very smart, a service member. There are some questions now about his service and his various awards that he doesn't have a good answer for. But really, I think the Democrats are rallying around him because he's black. And they're telling themselves, well, because of his skin color and the fact that he's a centrist, that means that young progressives will vote for him, and then centrist Democrats will vote for him. So it's a win-win. And then maybe, independents or whatever will vote for him. So the fact that he's black is really, really important to them. For example, if he were Jewish, now a different centrist governor who's Jewish, like maybe Josh Shapiro, that's not going to work, right? Because progressives won't vote for a Jew. So you gotta praise his blackness as a part of this political calculation. What that says about the Democratic Party, I'll let you come up to your own conclusion. Other people in the post-Democrats who are not clinging to hope, and this is me, I am hopeless about the Democratic Party. Others check themselves out in the mirror and they wonder if this is what a Republican looks like. Either way, for both sides of the post-Democrats, they're tearing what's left out of their hair as they silently mock NPR, but they can't stomach Fox News. They don't fit in anywhere, right? I've talked about this before. These people, me included, we're culturally from the left. We've never been to a Trump rally. We're not interested in wearing MAGA hats. We're also hardworking and pragmatic. We recognize, certainly in 2025, we recognize that COVID, the specifically Democratic hysteria around COVID was vicious to children. I just met up with an old colleague. She was telling me how great her early teen daughter was doing. And then after 2 years of not being able to be in school in New York City, the teen has had some really, really, really tough times. And COVID is just, taking kids out of their teenagers, especially teenage girls, taking them out of a social context, isolating them they were never at risk. And the young teachers teaching them, they weren't at risk either. It's just, we recognize how much damage. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to think about the Democratic hysteria of COVID from the isolation perspective. So they recognize, these post-Democrats, both sides, skeptics, 1 foot outs, 2 foot outs, they both recognize that was really damaging. They also recognize that Biden was most likely never fit to be our president. He didn't have occasional lapses, or even if he did have occasional lapses, that just means you're not fit for office. And lastly, my favorite cause, they note that Palestinian freedom in the most illiberal and violent region on earth is perhaps their number one priority. So these post-democrats, these skeptics, they're emotionally allergic to ranking humans. They don't think it's a good idea. They know meat is delicious, and they wonder why Americans are so fat and diseased despite really high monthly insurance payments. And every time you go to the doctor, you pay more and more of a deductible. I'm paying $75 deductibles now. You should see my healthcare bills. They're crazy. Why is America so sick? And what is the Democratic answer for that? Nothing. So they also, these skeptics, now the true blue believers won't agree with anything I just said, but the skeptics of both sides, they'll also notice that the Trump administration and the MAGA sort of movement in general, which has taken over, which has transformed the Republican Party, they'll notice that they are prioritizing outcomes over process. They don't always agree with the priorities driving the outcomes, like rounding up nonviolent illegal immigrants who are just, trying to live in this country and work, but they know efficacy when they see it. The Trump administration is doing things. It's doing things. Biden administration said a lot of things, passed $1 trillion legislation, didn't build the EV chargers. It didn't really do much. It didn't change anything. The talk was great. There was actual legislation, but because of complicated reasons of democratic belief in bureaucracy, nothing really happened. The skeptics also note that the tariffs that the supposed tariff apocalypse has not happened. We have not destroyed the global economy. In fact, we're encouraging factory building in America. Now, the economy is still super screwed up. It's bad. And obviously, that is the one measure of the Trump administration that matters. And I, as an American, as a capitalist, I'm hoping the economy gets better. I need it to get better for me and for my family. But that is certainly something you can't just ignore, that whatever moves Trump is making are not creating an apocalypse. But if he can't get the economy heading in the right direction, he's toast. And he should be toast, because that's your job, is to grow the country. Keep the country safe and grow the country. Okay, so we've got the two groups, and I can prove to you that there are two groups: the true blues versus the skeptics, because just a couple of weeks ago, this is super inside baseball, but the Democratic National Committee, they felt the need to come up with a position and a party plank about Israel and about the Islamic wars against Israel, which is the better way to characterize it. But it's really important for the DNC to have a plank in their platform about Israel, and they couldn't come up with one, right? They were just fighting about it, and they just couldn't come up with it. Do they support Palestinian transophobes? Do they support the Jews who are colonizers? You can call them both names. They couldn't come up with it. But what you can observe is that the true blue folks, they have the media megaphone, right? They're well represented. The post-Dems, the skeptics, they're listening to niche podcasts like this right now, social media, Substacks, right? The former group, the true bluers, take comfort in their azure fortresses, and they've long pulled up the drawbridge over the moats. I mean, they are locked in. The latter crew, the post-Dems, were wandering the fields outside the castle walls, kind of in a daze, trying to find a new direction. So I'm going to skip over some of my stuff about that I've been called a racist apartheid advocate because I support Israel. So I'm going to skip that because, folks, if you're a true blue believer, this is an emergency. There's no time for morals. We got all hands on deck. So from my perspective, this divide within the party, right? You have the base, and you have people who are just less invested and skeptical about the entire party. I think that spells disaster for the Democrats. I just think they're going to lose more and more elections as more and more Americans stop identifying with their quasi-religious identity beliefs. And remember that when the Democrats are in power, they prioritize process over outcomes, right? It's the process, it's the discourse, it's the legislation. Who really cares what happens at the end of it? Now, that seems easy to mock. But since observably, the true bluers are wealthy whites. They're college educated, wealthy whites. So if that's the Democratic Party now, the shrinking party, they don't notice the lack of outcomes. They're rich. They don't care what happens with the EV legislation. They just install a charger at home, or the resort fees are something they can just afford, or the tuition for the colleges. They don't care. They have the money for it. All right. So I see this all the time. I'm a keen observer of some of these sort of Jewish, more niche communities in Brooklyn. I'm a leader of a very obscure niche community in Brooklyn. And what I'm observing is that as non-liberals leave these groups, the groups are resilient. They're not going anywhere, right? But they're getting weirder. They're kind of becoming more insular because only liberals now will join, right? It's not, the open tent is not happening anymore. The tent is closed in the left wing movement, and that the tent walls are becoming fortress walls. So the people within the fortress, obviously new people do join them. People are born and are raised and affiliate in the ways they want to affiliate. So, but as these groups go on, they just get kind of weird. They get insular. They're sort of inbred with self-reinforcing ideas, rituals, signifier clothing, slogans, vocabulary. They just kind of get kind of strange. And they have this chant, genocide is a chant, of course, the one that I pay attention to about Israel. You could point to maybe this focus on trans children as a different kind of, it's a little weird to really just make that your focus. Maybe boosters, COVID boosters for children, you could say it doesn't seem particularly scientific. There's a long list of things that they do. At the end of the day, as these groups get more insular, they're just not very cool. Like, who wants to join that? Some people are there. That's fine. They should enjoy themselves. But like, that's not that attractive. Okay. Another way to say this politically is that I think it's a fait accompli. Zoran Mamdani will certainly win the mayoral election in the fall. He already has the full support of legacy media, legacy academics, and legacy cultural institutions, and these legacy niche communities that I see across Brooklyn and New York. But statewide, if he does run for governor or senator or whatever he wants to do next, if that's what he wants, I think that he'll flop, because by then voters will have a chance to evaluate his policies. Right now, he hasn't done much as an assembly member in New York. He's sort of a do-nothing politician, but he's really young, so give him a chance. And then upstate, we have a lot of Republican voters, and in Long Island and Staten Island and so forth. So I think that these groups, these little blue groups, are appealing to themselves, but not to others. Okay, what if I'm totally wrong, right? The true blue believers, whom I try to talk to, they can't really tolerate my analysis, but they say I'm wrong. I'm blind to the jackbooted thugs marching down our streets everywhere. Okay, not marching now, but like now, soon, very soon. They're coming sometime. Not sure when. Eventually, but they're coming. This is an emergency. They're in the emergency camp. The sky may look far away to you, but it's actually falling. It's falling right now. They acknowledged Trump won the last election. That's nice of them. I think it's pretty clear to most reasonable people that Trump would have won in 2020 had people known Biden's health status. But there is a very hard to detect but very immediate fascist coup happening right now, and that outweighs all other considerations of policy failures and the unpopularity of the Democratic Party. So, to me, this fascism narrative is kind of a tough sell to Americans who have already voted for Trump, which is the majority of Americans, and to the middle and working class blue state voters who ask, why is education, healthcare, housing, transportation, phones, Wi-Fi service, electricity, food, cars, and entertainment cost so much? Why is it so expensive? Now, if the answer to their question is that they shouldn't ask the question because it's an emergency, we're being taken over right now, as defined by a shrinking elite who can afford everything I just listed, then I think I won't be the only one chuckling along to J.D. Vance's podcast singers about cats in his 2032 reelection campaign. because I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows what JD Vance's future is? He's just a young, charismatic, intelligent, articulate guy with a lot of power. So maybe it'll be him. But I just think that, my big picture observation is that the Liberal Party in Israel has essentially disappeared. I know it's different in America. We have a two-party system. That's never going to change in our lifetimes. But the Democratic Party is just becoming strange and weird. Hey, I had a bit of a technical snafu while I was wrapping up the podcast, so I'm going to try to paste this together. But yeah, the Democratic Party, I think, is just kind of becoming smaller. And in that shrinking, it's kind of becoming weirder to my perspective. And I think to a reasonable American's perspective, it's just becoming more niche. So no, it's not going to be like Israel, where just like parties just kind of come and go pretty quickly. Even if it was the founding party of the state of Israel, I still think it's shocking that it's gone, that the Labor, Avodah. But the Democratic Party, from my opinion, it should just go away. I think it's hopeless. I don't think they've had any new ideas since the 1964, 1965, I think was the last time they had a new idea. And I just like the Whig Party. We don't have that anymore. The Tories in this country. I just think we need a new party with some kind of new philosophy. There's a lot of things within the Democratic Party to support, but they're not effective in executing anything. And they lost the thread of the narrative by investing in identities, by taking the civil rights movement and glorifying victims, which, do they ever really think about what would happen if they were effective as a party and then the victims were no longer victims? Then what about the other people who lose? Do they become victims? Do we then support them? It doesn't, like, are the Democrats going to champion evangelical Christians if secular Muslims sort of rise to? It doesn't make any sense. So it's just kind of dumb to think about. So in any event, thank you so much for listening. Appreciate your time. I wish you luck in making political decisions going forward. It is not so easy right now. Take care.